Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Bartkus, the Executive Director here at the Ridgefield Historical Society, and I'd like to welcome you to the Ridgefield History Club here at the Scott House at 4 Sunset Lane in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Today's date is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Happy New Year to everyone, it's great to see you. I know we were snowed out last month. The Ridgefield Historical Society is dedicated to preserving and sharing Ridgefield's historical, cultural, and architectural heritage from the indigenous people who lived here 10,000 years ago up to the present day. And we welcome everyone to get involved by becoming members and volunteers of the Ridgefield Historical Society. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you about one of our upcoming events. It's called the Fantastic Women of Ridgefield Bus Tour that Dr. Darla Shaw is going to be leading for us.
And hopefully will work.
And it's taking place on Saturday, March 23rd at 11 o'clock. And Darla is going to be the guide on this bus that's going to traverse the roads of Ridgefield. And she's going to share stories of over 50 fascinating women from Ridgefield's history. So if you'd like to join us on this bus tour, there are a few tickets left. Go to our website and sign up for that very exciting event to commemorate Women's History Month.
I'd like to thank Sally and Jack too, because they have authenticated everything I was going to say.
Thank you, thank you. So for today, we're very lucky to have Jack Sanders in attendance, who has written over 10 books on Ridgefield's history, and specifically one that relates to today's topic of discussion, Ridgefield names. And if you don't have a copy of Jack's book, we have several of them on our bookshelf here that are available for purchase, and I'm sure Jack would be willing to sign them as well if you'd like an autographed copy. Today's topic is Ridgefield Place Names stories, and we're excited to talk about how some of the places in Ridgefield received their names and the stories behind them. Many of you may have wondered how your streets got their names, and there are so many interesting and unique place names throughout Ridgefield that we're hoping that you'll be able to share some of your stories and also bring your questions that Jack and others can help answer today. I would like to start off with Katuna Street. So many of you know that this house, the Scott House, which was built in 1714 by David Scott, was originally located on the corner of Main Street and Katuna. And then in the early 20th century, it was moved a few hundred feet to the west, and the commercial building that's there today, the brick building, was constructed. And then in the early 2000s, this building faced demolition, and a group got together and raised the funds to disassemble it and reconstruct it here today. And it serves as the headquarters of the Ridgefield Historical Society. So I've always been curious, where did that name come from, Katuna? It's very unusual and unique, and I'm wondering if anyone would be able to tell me some more about that.
Well, I thought that it was because of the Indian, or Native Americans, the Indians, the Katuna tribe.
Chief Katuna. So Chief Katuna.
That's what I've heard. That's what's going on in the back of my mind. Yeah.
Okay.
He's the chief.
And could anyone tell me more about Chief Katuna?
You exhausted my knowledge there.
He signed the very first deed of purchase, 20,000 acres in 1708, and he was probably didn't actually live here. He probably lived over in South Salem, Lewisboro area, because he had land over there which he sold to people in that direction. But I think, and I've never had gotten down to research this, it's somewhat unusual that Ridgefield, when it was settled, was actually purchased from American Indians. most of the other land in Connecticut, I think, was just kind of taken over by the European settlers. But in 6 different deeds over a period of 25 years, Ridgefielders paid the local American Indians money or goods for the land. Of course, it's probably a lot more valuable than what they paid, but it's something I'd like to check sometime to see if there are other towns, how many other towns in Connecticut actually compensated the people that they took the land from.
Jack, is it true that I've heard stories that Katuna moved north to Katona, and that's how Katona got the name with a different
That's where
pronunciation?
he, as I said, he lived over that way. He didn't move there. That's where he was believed to have had his center of operations. I think, I'm not very expert on the natives of this area, and there are people like Mrs. Whelan, who was very good on that. But they moved around a lot, especially seasonally. But so I think that, I mean, that's what the Katona, New York got its name from also. That's right. Probably more deserving than Ridgefield, because he lived over that way.
I think he was the chief of the Sachem tribe.
Sachem is a kind of position. He was a chief of, can't remember the Ramapo village of.
Yes.
So it wasn't Lenape's here? No?
They were more coastal, I think, but they came up here too.
If you spread it out, it was Eastern Woodland, who were Lenape, and there's a, Betsy, can you say the word Weechquisquask? There's a about this that was the name of the group that was right in this vicinity, who had lived here for centuries.
Barb,
Yes.
you have, when you worked at Town Hall,
Yeah.
all of those purchases are there, and people can come and look at them. I think people should
Absolutely.
know that.
And they're really, it's really fascinating to see that copy of that very first deed. And I think they sold it to him for £100, whatever that translates back then. I don't know. But, yeah, you can look at them. It's under lock and key, but, you ask the town clerk and she'll let you look at it.
So he signed the deed with an X, right? He just signed the deed with an X.
Yeah, a symbol.
A pictograph.
Well,
Yes.
can I throw out something that's maybe a little controversial, that they didn't know they were selling? They didn't understand the concept of ownership.
That's correct.
And so they thought they were just getting in some, I've seen this in other parts of America where they were getting a couple of barrels of rum or something. There was no concept of ownership, so as far as they could, there were no lawyers there, right, to represent their interests.
Right.
So whether they were selling is questionable.
That first deed says, I, Katona, Sachem of the Ramapo Indians and Associates, within Her Majesty's province of New York in America. And goes on, as you said, £100. His name was appearing as early as 1680 when he sold 22 Stamford residents a tract called the Hop Ground, which was became the town of Bedford, New York. So he was involved in early
Early real estate.
whether he knew it or not.
Yeah.
And I think so many of the names in Ridgefield connect to the first peoples who lived here, right? I can think of Lake Minimasco and tons of others, but Ramapu Road.
There's also a lot that has been lost, which is unfortunate. And one of my favorites is called Peace Bunk, which was a place out on the North Salem Road Valley, on the west side of the road, north of Mamonasco, on the mountainside there, where the natives had what was the equivalent of a hothouse, sauna setup. That's what a peace bunk was. And they would, you know, heat themselves up and then jump in a nearby spring-fed little pool to cool off suddenly. And that was invigorating. And that name was in use in the early, let's say 1730s, 1740s, 50s as an area of town. And it just, by 1800 it had fallen out of use, and it's too bad because it reflects something that happened here that people don't know about. And they could learn a little something more about how people lived before the Europeans arrived. Another one that doesn't sound like an Indian name because it's an English name, but is American Indian in origin, is Fort Hill. Fort Hill is at the foot of Barrack Hill Road on North Salem Road. There's the angle of the hillside goes up fairly steeply there, and a lot of historians believe that had something to do with an old fort that was during the Revolutionary period. And
Right.
it worked.
Is that right where Continental Drive goes up the hill?
Yeah.
What roads are you talking about?
Okay.
But that name turns up in deeds in the 1740s and 50s, long before the Revolution. So there was a fort up there very early on, and since there's no record of the settlers having a fort, it's believed that it was an American Indian fort. And there are a number of places around Connecticut called Fort Hill because of that. So it's another little piece of Ridgefield's history that's kind of forgotten, but if you look at the place names, you get little revelations about the past. And that's why when I did this book, I call it A History of Ridgefield Through Its Place Names. There's a lot of history in just the names that are on the land. Not just roads, but hills, ponds, streams.
So that piece of land that you were saying, where they had the kind of like a spa area up past the high school on the left,
Yeah.
is that where Francis Martin had lived?
Someplace up in there.
Up in that
It's
area?
almost impossible to pinpoint where some of these old places were,
Yeah.
because the deeds were just, they didn't say it was along Main Street or North Salem Road or something.
Right.
They
They gave
used
landmarks.
road names then.
Right.
And, but you can get a sense of, from who owned the land nearby, where things were. Just read, one of the things I did 50 years ago, 40 years ago, was to read all the deeds in the town clerk's records from 1708 until the 1880s. And in order to get a sense of what names there were, when they were first used,
Right.
what ones have been forgotten,
Yeah.
that are out of, out of use now.
When did Ridgefield get its name, Ridgefield? Was that 1708, or was it?
It was around in there. They by 1714, when it got its patent, it had its name originally spelled Ridgfield.
Okay.
Almost always spelled that way.
Nice. and that was because of the ridges that, you know, the geology of the town. Okay.
And Ridgebury is a combination of Ridgefield and Danbury. Two places there.
Nice.
Great. Does anyone have a place name story that they would like to share with us? Perhaps a street you live on, or a name that you have always wondered about?
I have Barlow Mountain. I grew up in Twixt Hills on Lake Narragansett, or Pierpont Lake, Pierpont Pond. And I've been over the years, or last couple of years, last 10 years, updating it on, it was never on OpenStreetMap. So I do edit OpenStreetMap, which is basically a Wikipedia for mapping. So I kept on putting Barlow Mountain where Barlow Mountain is. But somebody kept on changing it. So it's a worldwide organization. So then there was Barlow Mountain, and then there was Barrow Mountain. So every time I put in Barlow Mountain and took out Barrow Mountain, somebody would take out Barrow Mountain, or put in Barrow Mountain and take out Barlow Mountain. So I've always been interested in maps, and I make maps for a living. So then I decided I might as well check with the USGS and their official names place database. And I sent them an official, because I didn't see it in there. So then I contacted them, and they said, no, there is no Barlow Mountain. It was like, that's crazy. Everybody has known this is Barlow Mountain. And so somebody had been changing it, or people have been changing it. And so I put in a placement, making that an official place name. But to name a mountain, you actually need a lot of documentation, a lot of backup. But somebody at the USGS, whose name was Roger Barlow, he wasn't even involved in it, but somebody sent him an email. I said, hey, there's this Barlow Mountain, you might be interested. And it turned out he was like the great whatever grandson of John Barlow, who had a blacksmith shop on Old Barlow Mountain Road, or on the trail. And he had been researching his family, and he's from Massachusetts, so he had really no connection to this area. But it really intrigued him that all of a sudden there's this Barlow Mountain that somebody's looking for a place name. And so he actually started the process. He talked to you and got a lot of the official documents. It took over a year, and now officially we have Barlow Mountain and have done away with Barrow Mountain. But it was kind of strange, because then I had worked for the New York State DEC, and he knew my boss, and he knew a childhood friend, and I live in Chile, and he worked in Antarctica, and then we both went to Syracuse University, and so we had a lot of, we're still friends now.
That's great.
There is, of course, in Reading. I used to live in Reading. Ridgefield's next door neighbor, and the high school is named Barlow High School after Joel Barlow, who was born and raised on a small farm in Reading, and became ambassador to the court of Napoleon Bonaparte. And he died actually during Napoleon's retreat from Moscow in 1812. But it was spelled Barlow, B-A-R-L-O-W, and his first name is Joel. And there's a sawmill in Reading, or the remnants of a sawmill, where his brother Aaron Barlow lived. And there's a house on that street, and there was a name over the entrance on this house. It said Aaron Barlow, and apparently a lot of people stopped by and took photographs, and so the owners got tired of all these tourists. They took the name Aaron Barlow down, so now nobody really knows, except a few people who lived in Reading many years, that Joel Barlow's brother Aaron lived in that house. So I don't know, Bruce, if
I don't
there's
think
a
there was a
connection.
connection.
It just happened to be green.
Actually,
Or was, you let it right now.
Reading at that time, of course, was Fairfield, a parish of Fairfield, and John Barlow came, the one that was on the mountain, came from Fairfield. So it's quite possible that their families were connected in some way or another. I think Barlow was one of the old Fairfield names.
Yeah.
So a good genealogist could have the answer to that, but
'Cause I have two friends who last name are people I know that are named Barlow, and they don't know of any connection between them with either one of those.
There was a Bob Barlow in
Bob
town.
Barlow,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know Bob, yeah.
I don't think he was connected.
No.
He told me that.
today you can still find remnants of Barlow's farm on the mountain up near the top, along the trail that goes from Knollwood Road across to Limestone Road.
Yeah, I used to hunt for bottles there when I was a little kid.
I used to find old wrought iron pieces buried in the ground there. Got some nails from there.
There's actually an old tree with a iron hoop from a wagon wheel.
Huh?
It's right on this pretty old tree, it looks like.
Well, they say that was a stage route at one time
Yeah.
over the mountain, and that the stagecoaches may have stopped at this place to refresh the horses.
Yeah.
Well, is Old Stagecoach Road, was that a stagecoach road that went?
That's actually a little different in direction. That was the stagecoach that went from Ridgebury, from where the McKeon place was.
Right.
The Hunts lived there. They ran a stagecoach from there down to Norwalk, and they would go down the hill.
That goes down towards Ledges.
Yes,
Yeah.
it used to exist.
There used to be a nice trail there until
Yeah.
they built all those big
Yeah.
houses.
It's the old road, yeah.
Yeah.
Ledges Road was part of that?
Well, when it went into, it goes up, there is a route, actually.
Yeah.
It goes
Along
up into
that
old,
cliffside,
Ledges.
there's actually a road.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
Oh, on Ledges Trail. Up at the top.
Yeah, on the northern side of Ledges
I've
Road,
seen,
Yeah.
yeah,
it goes up to Old Stagecoach Road,
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
which is what it is.
right, okay. Nice.
There used to be a nice hiking trail when we were kids, but then it's private land, and so eventually it was developed and it's private. It's hard. I mean, you can't really trespass.
Well, there is an open space,
On the top, yeah.
On the top.
On the hill, yeah.
yeah. Are you saying down lower?
Yeah, lower, and then it kind of winds around, and then it goes down onto Ledges Road.
Okay, because the open space that the Conservation
Yeah.
Commission has, there is a trail, and then there's
Yeah.
a section that is open space, but it's land conservancy, so
Yeah.
you're not supposed to do any trail work or anything.
Oh, it's
on that
actually
part.
stipulated that. I didn't know.
Yeah, you can see when you're coming down Ridgebury Road from North Salem
Going
Road.
west.
Well, no, you're going east.
Oh, on the trail. Okay, yeah.
Right when you get to Ledges Road, you hit that stop sign. If you look across the street, you'll see a green land conservancy
You're talking about
sign.
Sherwood, where Sherwood comes in?
No,
Oh.
this is where Ledges Road comes into Ridgebury Road.
Oh, up there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There's a big chunk of. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Right. So,
Can I ask a question about Red Mountain Goat Valley? I've been walking along Silver Spring, and I know it's a country club, and I know it's a road, and there's a little sort of place with a seat that says Silver Spring, and I tried to read up about it, and it sounded as though there were some local outlaws who were stealing chickens, and who hid in the Silver Spring swamp at one point, but I couldn't get much further than that, and I haven't read Jack's book yet, but maybe that will solve it.
It will tell you more than you need to know. But that's another very old name, which is kind of cool because it's poetic almost. It dates from 1720s. So the very first people that had settled the town named it that spring, which is, I assume you all know where it is on Silver Spring Road. It's owned by the town now. It's a conservation commission land.
Right.
And somebody put up a rail fence there. I think it was a scout, right? And put in a bench. And there's a sign that says Silver Spring that keeps falling off, unfortunately, because nobody takes care of it now. But the spring struck the early settlers as just kind of something magical.
Yeah.
It had it was so pure and so calm, I guess, that it looked like it was silver. The surface of it was silver. And it had nothing to do with the mineral.
Right.
There was no silver that we know of ever mined in that area of town. So it was Silver Spring because of the way it looked, and it's kind of an unusually colorful name for early Ridgefield kind of staid settlers. And that road that runs along there was a very early route between Ridgefield and Norwalk, which was, of course, the mother town for Ridgefield. So that's it keeps its name in Wilton, it keeps its name in Lewisboro when it goes through Lewisboro. Then when it comes back out in Wilton, New Canaan, it changes its name to Bald Hill, I think, or Bald Hill North, or something like that.
Well, at some point, I'd like you to show me where that sign is and where that spring is, because I make signs for the Conservation Commission, and I would love to.
This is a wooden, one of those, what do you call that, burnt,
Yeah.
when you burn the names into the wood, that kind of a sign.
Yeah.
There's a falling down, post and rail fence and a little pull-off. It's, when you're
Right
coming,
across from where we met,
Right.
right across from there.
Okay.
and there are still people who go there
Yeah.
and get water.
I get water there when I bike by, yeah, definitely. I don't have any problems.
Ever had it tested?
No, I was always curious, yeah.
Well, it just makes me nervous that it's downhill from the country club.
Yeah, exactly. Seriously, yeah. I thought about that myself.
Lots of chemicals.
Pretty, I guess, not organic, but they're,
Environmentally conscious.
yes, environmentally conscious.
Yeah.
You still never know what's
Yeah, I'd be
maybe going
curious.
into there.
The town, I guess, has never tested it.
Maybe the Conservation Commission would.
I don't think the
Maybe.
town encourages you to drink from it, though.
Doesn't say anything against it, so people would assume it, yeah.
Yeah, Elaine and Sandy said their father used to go over there to get the spring water.
Yeah.
Really?
And my husband used to say that they'd go over there to get watercress. You still
Yeah.
grow
They're still there.
naturally.
Oh,
Still
Is it
tons of
still there?
Oh,
Yeah.
loads of it.
Yeah,
Even in the snow, it's green,
Yes.
it's really
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
I didn't realize it was watercress.
yeah,
It's tempting.
yeah. They'd go over there to get watercress.
Well, I grew up in town, and I grew up on Continental Drive, and when I was younger, I thought it was because of Continental Airlines and that type of thing. But then I found out later that it's because of the Continental Army and Barrack. It runs into Barrack Hill and North Salem Road, and so it has that connection with the barracks that were there.
French barracks, so.
Right, it was the French that were there, and I also would go out looking for bottles and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
things like that along stone walls and things like that up in that area, and I found quite a few.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
I didn't keep them though.
You didn't keep them, or you break them.
No, I didn't. I kept them and then they disappeared after.
I wanted to talk about some of the women in town. Doing the research for the bus tour, right across from East Ridge, there's a Roland Lane, And Alice and her husband lived there. She was an early politician in town. And then, of course, we have King Lane, goes back to colonial time, which is next to Jessie Lee. And Anne King and her husband lived on that lane, and that's how it got its name. And near the Danbury line by Ridgebury, where there's a lot of keel or streets or drives, there was a powder maker lane. And this wasn't husband and wife. This was two sisters who became very famous. The powder maker sisters, Florence and Hortense. One was very early on into child psychology and shell shock for veterans, how to treat them, and her sister was an archaeologist. Liz Leonard was a politician. There's Liz Leonard Highway, and I think that's great because it's near her house. But Sarah Bishop Road is nowhere near where Sarah Bishop, the hermit, lived. And when I talk about Sarah, people say, "Oh, I know where the cave is. It's
Yeah,
up on
exactly.
Sarah
Yeah.
Bishop Road." I said, "No, it's on the other end of town." Orinoco. And the other one that's interesting, and it's Maurice Sendak Highway. People think he lived near Limestone gas station somewhere, and he lived way up off, Chestnut Road. Now,
Near Sarah Bishop Road.
yeah, he lives right near Sarah Bishop, right. And the other one, I think those were the main ones I was thinking of. But Jack, do you know anything? Does it make a difference where you name a road? Does it have to be, or should it be near where the
You would think
location of the
so.
person?
You would think so. And Sarah Bishop is, Bub Finch named that road, and he named it because he thought it was an interesting character from Ridgefield's past. He also named another road up there, Parley, which was, this is awful, because there's, not only did Peter Parley have nothing to do with that area, but there's also already a Parley Lane in the center of town, down off of West Lane, and there's a Peter Parley Road, believe it or not, in front of the schoolhouse, the West Lane Schoolhouse, that little lane that has no street addresses on it, but it's a road. So if the fire department gets a call to Parley Lane, or, is the person really on Parley Road way up in Ridgebury, 5 miles or 6 miles away? Or, and that happens all the time. Revere Drive and Revere Place are in two entirely different parts of town, and the person it's named after had nothing to do with Ridgefield.
And what
Or
about,
Revere.
what about Peaceable? Peaceful Hill, Peaceful Ridge,
Yeah,
Peaceful
that-
Road?
that's
It's-
the
yeah,
constant
that's-
confusion there.
Yeah,
But aren't they all in a similar area? Peaceful?
Yes,
Yeah,
they are.
okay, yeah.
They're at least fairly close
Yeah.
together, although Peaceable Street in Georgetown begins in Ridgefield, or at the edge of Ridgefield. And every once in a while, you get a call from Peaceable Street in Georgetown. It gets answered up by this 911 operation up here, and they're looking all over western Ridgefield for somebody that's actually down in Georgetown.
I think one of our favorite road names is West Branchville Road.
Yeah.
Does everybody know where that is?
no,
Behind the tracks.
It's on the east side of the Branchville train
the
station.
east side, not the west side.
That little road that goes along up to the storage facilities, West Branchville Road.
It's the easternmost road in town.
It's called West Branchville.
And
Oh, really?
the town has named it West Branch. It used to be Old Main Highway, because that was the old, before the new section of Route 7 was built
Yeah.
in the 1920s through Branchville. That was the main highway on that side of the track.
So who names the roads? Is it just
don't
the
know.
contractors that are
crazy.
building on those roads, or is it?
It's an ancient road, so
Yeah.
I don't know who
Yeah.
did
They-
that.
they
The
do.
town must have done it.
Yeah, then it goes to planning and zoning, yeah.
Well,
They-
you used to
well,
name roads for the
Except
town,
now.
Jack.
Yeah, but I didn't name that one. But it just appeared, I've never been able to find, nobody will admit it.
Old highway.
Sir Philippi Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that one.
I wanted to ask Jack, Prospect Street. What was behind that?
Back in the just after the Civil War, there was a big move on in Ridgefield to draw, because a lot of people were leaving town. A lot of the younger people were moving west. The west, was opening up. There was better farmland. There were a lot of people were going to cities where there was more opportunities and factories, and it was just losing population. And some of the leaders in town decided that Ridgefield should start promoting itself as a place for people's summer estates, New York City rich people could have their country homes up here, or just as a good place to live and commute, especially after the branch line came in 1870 into the village. You could take a train from the village all the way to New York City in just over a little over 2 hours. So commuting was possible, reasonable commuting, and so it's part of the development. They started fiddling around with names like High Ridge Road was High Ridge Road for from in the 1700s, early 1800s, but sometime in the 1870s it became High Ridge Avenue. Avenue was a fancy word,
Yeah.
French origin, that indicated it was a tree-lined thoroughfare. It was something more like a boulevard, something fancy, not just a road. Prospect Street, I'm not sure what that was originally called. It was an old road, and it wasn't much used until the train line came in, and they put the depot down at the foot of the hill. But that became Prospect because that was a cool name for views. It suggested that there was great views up there in Prospect Ridge, and there were nice views of it. And somebody eventually built a nice estate up there, and there were some nice houses up toward the top of Prospect Street. They still are, yeah. But I mean, some really big houses.
Okay.
I mean, I think S.S. Denton had his house up there, and
Where Ridgefield Arms there was a very big house there.
yes,
Also
Yeah.
called to us the Scott House.
yeah,
I mean,
Oh.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
There was a,
and it had a wraparound porch on it, a really big wraparound porch.
Well, what did they call the three ridges early on?
well,
Main Street, the town
they were
street?
called, High Ridge is a very early name.
Yeah.
And the town street, the town ridge, and then sometimes Middle Ridge. And then, East Ridge was,
So Prospect Ridge was not,
the Prospect Ridge was the upper part of East Ridge.
Right.
And
Yeah.
which is kind of a confusing.
Well, that's where the novitiate was.
yeah.
The what?
Novitiate.
We just was.
Yes, but that was
Prospect
built as a big fancy estate.
It was an estate, but when we were growing up, it was a working farm.
Street. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the guy that built it was a doctor who was dying.
So-
And he
So then
probably never really got a chance to live there. His family did afterwards, but
Really?
Matlock,
so at some point the Catholic Church brought it from them?
yes, yeah, the Holy Ghost Fathers who were
Yeah.
called something else now, some fancy.
The grotto, somebody's cleaned that up. That was built by Father Churtel, that I know.
Yeah, that's
Where are these?
interesting. Stick a statue in it now.
Yeah.
Well, they've got some urns, they put the urns back and they cleaned all the,
That's good.
well, at least the last time I, cause I went to Rudy one day and I said, can't you get somebody to clean out the,
You used to go to masses there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outdoor masses?
there were votive candles, so people would go and light the candles.
We have stations.
Oh, yes.
And there were stations, yeah.
This is up at the top where the congregate housing is?
Yeah, I always wondered what that big, that's what you said was Scott
Yeah,
House?
kind of across
And
from
it
the-
had-
No, that wasn't Scott House, no.
No,
This
no,
is
no, no.
the congregate housing on Prospect Ridge was originally a mansion
Right,
that became a novitiate for the Holy Ghost Fathers, the same people that operate Duquesne University
Yeah.
in Pittsburgh.
It's on the backside of East Ridge School.
And they operated it, it's a fairly self-sufficient farm, right?
Yes, yes.
Cows and chickens
Chickens,
and
everything.
all
There
that
was a
stuff.
pond back there with a rope swing on it.
And,
Good fruit trees.
They were missionaries. Those
Yes.
priests, they didn't have parishes.
priests and brothers, both.
Yeah,
I
and
guess.
then they went to Ferndale, which is
Norwalk.
Norwalk, and now Ferndale is not a hospitality center.
Yeah, like La Chateau.
Yeah, kind of, but that you can have weddings there
Yes.
and businesses have conferences there. We were, our families in that area were quite friendly with the brothers that lived there.
But they, like so many other orders and religious communities, suffered fewer vocations. They had fewer people interested in joining, and they had to downsize. And so they shut the novitiate, and the town bought it in 1970, I believe. And it's just it's 20-some acres. There's now athletic fields, and there's the Ridgefield Theater Barn, the Guild of Artists,
Marines.
the Marine Corps League. There's two sets of affordable housing up there, one of which was privately developed on this public land, which is kind of a cool thing, by the Nolan brothers of Danbury. The dog park is up there, Little League Field, and there's lots of woods back there still. Volunteer Fire Department is creating a museum up there.
Okay.
Yes.
So where did Halpin come in on that?
Halpin was a farmer who lived up at the end of Halpin Lane, around in there, before, and I guess he was still around in that neighborhood after the Matlock estate was developed. So the town bought it for, I don't know, $200,000 or something. It just, and it wound up using the main buildings as headquarters for the school board for a number of years. We used to go to school board meetings in their, what used to be their chapel. So instead of the priests up on the, where the altar was, it was the Board of Education.
so what's it used for now, that
It's
big
congregate
mansion?
housing.
Congregate housing.
All the mansion as well, because I've seen the congregate housing, but I wondered about the big building.
No, the congregate houses is not those houses in front.
Oh, it's not?
The congregate housing is in that building.
Oh,
It's
The
a
stone,
oh, okay.
the
It's
stone building.
It's got a huge addition on the back. That the,
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was private, I went for a walk and I wasn't sure if it was private material.
no, it's, the
Oh, you
town
can go
owns
there.
all that.
Wasn't there a tower over there or something? I kind of remember a tower.
There was.
There
When I was a
was,
kid.
they
Yeah, there was.
tore it down in 72.
72, okay.
It
What was it though?
was a water tower.
Water tower.
Before the town had a water system, the Matlock people, I think, put that in. It would pump up the water and store it in there so they'd have water pressure.
Yeah.
There were a number of those up on East Ridge.
Where the ice skating rink is now,
Yes,
that was a house,
Yes.
a very big house, and two
moved
women
across the
lived.
street, right?
Beg your pardon?
It moved across the street.
Well, I don't,
Yeah.
but there were two women that lived, I'm almost sure,
Yeah, there
because I
was.
used to go clean the
Yeah.
bedroom one day
Yeah.
a week.
That house is still extant, it's on the other side of the road
Okay.
now. They moved that to do that.
I have a question about another couple of roads, Florida Hill and Florida Road. We're nowhere near Florida. The name of a family or
My favorite mystery.
is it? Oh,
Nobody has been able to figure out why
okay.
that part of town is called Florida.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of theories. There's at least 10 in the book, but among them is that it was named after a person, either their first name or their last name. But as I mentioned, I read all the deeds from that era
Yeah.
throughout that century.
Right.
And nothing like Florida. The closest I came was a woman named Valletta, who lived there and was well known.
Yeah.
Her first name was Valletta.
Right.
What's the earliest date?
It starts appearing in the records in 1837, which means that it was probably called being used before that. Now, another theory is that Ridgefield is kind of a very north-south oriented town in its shape, and it used to be much more north-south. Ridgefield used to extend all the way up to Sherman through western Connecticut, or western Danbury. Western Danbury, where like Victor Golf Course and
Yeah.
north of that, was all part of Ridgefield once, until 1846. So, that part of town, the Florida district, was kind of the equivalent of what the Florida state is.
Right.
And that is just after, the name appears shortly after Florida became a part of the United States. So there's some thought that maybe some creative individual decided to name the school district after the new state. There are theories about somebody from here might have moved there and left behind land that was that picked up the name Florida land because the people that owned it were in Florida.
Right.
And that actually happened in New Canaan. There's a section of New Canaan called Michigan. There's a Michigan Road in New Canaan. And the reason for that is that some people who lived thereabouts moved, resettled to Michigan, and after they were out there, they inherited land in that part of New Canaan, which is in northern New Canaan. And the land that they inherited became known as the Michigan lots, because the people that owned the land lived in Michigan. And that just developed over the years to a place name that
Yeah.
is still in use today.
Right. That, talking about Florida Hill and Florida Road, and then I was curious about Cooper Road and Cooper Hill and,
Let me give you one more Florida.
oh, okay, okay, I don't,
I can talk about Cooper if you want.
no, that's all right.
But Florida means flowers.
Yeah.
And Jill Kelly, former Conservation Commissioner
Right.
in Ridgefield,
Yeah.
suggested that it may have been because of all the flowers that, wildflowers in that area, particularly the mountain laurel or the dogwood. And the Latin name of dogwood is Cornus florida.
That sounds like it could be.
That sounds good.
Right.
Cooper Road there was a Cooper shop
Right, right,
there. And,
barrel maker.
Barrel maker, yes. People don't know what, that people made barrels.
Right, exactly. That's good.
I always thought it was a name of a person.
I grew up on Prospect Street in Demetrius parking lot, and the Osbornes owned, do you have anything on Richard Osborne, who owned from corner of Main Street down to Bailey
Well,
Avenue?
and he lived up at the top of
The top, yeah, the
Yeah.
big house, yeah.
That lumber yard that's now Ridgefield Supply started out in Branchville. And I can't remember the name of the person that started it, but it moved up to where it is now, around the 1870s. Probably because the train line allowed the lumber to be brought right up into town where it was more needed. And then it was taken over by the Osborne family that owned much of the area around Prospect Street, including the lumber yard. And Mr. Osborne had his house at the corner of Prospect and Main, the other side from the library. And beautiful house. It was torn down to make way for the brick Yankee Ridge Shopping Center in the early 70s, 50 years ago. That house, there was a woman who lived there.
Winter, yeah,
Winnie
Winter,
Carrier.
right, I was familiar with your daughter.
She
Ann.
was a daughter, I think, or a granddaughter, or son, or niece, or something.
Yeah, niece,
She lived in that house, became a writer, wrote books about cats and cats and dogs. She grew up there.
My mother had a story, she was a children's librarian for a while at the Ridgefield Library, and when she got married, they lived on a house that the Osbornes owned, and when it was being torn down, she was sitting at her desk, the children's library, and she remembers seeing the toilet going out the window of the house that she had lived in. Progress.
We actually have a picture of that. It's same with the Sheehan house, we have a picture of that being torn down. It was another kind of historic house because so many doctors had lived there over the years. It was a kind of a shame to lose.
And Sandy and I live in the Bryan Park Fairview Avenue, and that was a doctor who developed that, correct?
Dr. Bryan, B-R-Y-O-N, who lived on Main Street where the CVS shopping center is. He had a big house there, nice house. And it's hard to imagine that. That was nice housing, that was residential there. And he developed probably the first subdivider in town. He developed the first neighborhood, that whole Bryan Park, Fairview Avenue, Bryan Avenue, Greenfield Street or Avenue. One end of the road has one sign, Avenue, and the other has a street. And just full of people that have been very important in the community for the last century and a quarter now. And it's still a home of many people that are very involved in the community. He also developed Lake Kitchewan. That's the one right across it. It's Cross Pond, what do they call that? Is it Kitchewan?
In South Salem?
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the ponds.
No, the one that's,
Not Truesdale.
no, not, the one that's south of 35.
Not Truesdale Lake, no.
No, not the north of 35.
Kitchewan south of.
It's Kitchewan, I think, yeah. That lakeside, he developed that.
Dr. Bryant?
Dr. Bryant,
You
yeah.
developed that?
Ridgefield's Dr. Bryant developed that. Then he moved off to Norwalk.
May I ask quick
Yeah.
cemetery question? I see all the little family cemeteries,
Yes.
almost like in people's front gardens. Are they in perpetuity sort of allocated, or is it just that people out of respect just have left them in place?
It's pretty much that. I don't think there is a real, any real regulation on these little family cemeteries, one of which is on South Umstead Lane. The Seymour Cemetery is in somebody's front yard, and the people who live in the house, whose yard surrounds it, take care of it, and they're very proud of it. And generally these neighborhood cemeteries are taken care of. There's one on Lower West Lane near Country Club Road. I don't know if anybody's taking care of it, but it's in not bad condition. There's Bennett's Farm Cemetery. That is kind of
Where's the Bennett's Farm?
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
It's not, it's
Where's the
another
Bennett's Farm?
family
Yeah.
cemetery.
Tell them where Bennett's Farm.
Oh, where Bennett's Farm.
Where
is,
on that?
The Beers.
Off of, well, it's just south of where Limestone Road starts.
Huh. Yeah.
It's just a few hundred yards in on the left-hand side. It's just a little cemetery. It's got some interesting stones in it, interesting people. I'm just trying to think of some,
Beers?
the Beer Cemetery. That was taken care of by scouts for many years.
Yes.
But now, the last time I looked at it, it was pretty ratty.
It wasn't.
You would think that Weir Farm, which borders it,
Yeah,
would take care
care
of
of
it.
it.
That's weird, yeah.
Because a lot of people from that
Yeah,
old Beers Farm
yeah.
are buried there. That's on Nod Hill
Nod.
Road, just before you get to the national park there. Beer Cemetery.
Great.
Hey, can we get a photo? We should try to get a photo of everybody.
Yeah,
huh?
we could
Okay,
do a group
okay.
photo. Are there any final stories that anyone wants to share or questions?
I just wanted to say one thing I thought was funny. I live near Walnut Hill Road, and for some reason they had to put up a new sign, and instead of spelling it Walnut, they spelled it with two L's. And for years we tried to get it spelled correctly, so we would say, well, when you come up to visit, when you see Walnut Hill with two L's, that's where you turn.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
There's two entrances, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
That's another of those names.
Oh, they changed it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, yeah, but it was for years with two L's, yeah.
That's another of those names that confuses the fire department all the time, and the police. Walnut Hill and Walnut Grove.
Yeah.
Two totally different parts of town.
One's up there and the other's over there.
Well, I've lived on Fox Hill for almost 4 years now, and every other day I look for foxes, but I haven't seen one yet. No. But I live at the very top of Fox Hill, so is it? I wonder if it's named after a person. or after the animal?
It's a convoluted name, and here's the story about it. The guy who developed that, David Paul, not dead, wanted to call that place Ripple. I think the same as the estate on West Mount. Ornica. He wanted to call it Ornica. And the town wouldn't go for it because it would confuse the post office and others with the Ornica Road, and even though hardly anybody lives on Ornica Road way up on West Mountain. And so he knew that the property had been previously used as the Outpost Inn, which was developed by Colonel Lewis D. Conley, who lived on Outpost Farm. Outpost Farm is about 2 miles to the north, but his house, the Colonel's house, which was a big mansion, became the Fox Hill Inn, because that area was known as Fox Hills. I'm sure there are plenty of foxes up there. There's plenty of foxes all over town. It's Bennett's Pond State Park now, but the Fox Hill Inn operated there from the 40s until around 1970. Because Conley had lived in that house, which he didn't call Fox Hill, but the Fox Hill Inn called it Fox Hill, David Paul decided to take the name and use it for his condominiums, for the inn that Colonel Conley had built. Conley had built the Outpost Inn on the property that's now Fox Hill Condominiums. It's very confusing, but it's...
What happened to Outpost Inn? It's not there anymore.
The building, David Paul was going to use that, the main building, as the community center for Fox Hill. And it all of a sudden burned down one night. And it was really a shame because it was an 1816 house that had some amazing woodwork in it. It was a beautiful house, well made by a famous Ridgefield carpenter named Jennings, who built, by the way, the Big Shop, which is where, in the Bailey Avenue parking lot, where, what's the name of the restaurant? Terra Soleil and, what's the name? Luke's. Yes, the Big Shop that used to be on the site of the First Congregational Church.
That lane has a kind of, I don't know how to say it, not a so nice reputation because of who lived there when we were growing up.
The Big Shop?
Yes.
Yeah. It was a tenement.
Yes. But it was even more than for poor people. It was for poor people of color.
Yeah.
It was actually condemned by the town around 1970 as uninhabitable.
I'm talking about like in the 60s when we were, especially in high school.
Well, what's his name? That is
Mr.
car place there.
Murray.
What?
Murray's
Murray's, yes.
Murray's car wash.
Very
Was that Mr. Jennings, the Jennings that lived up in Stonecrest, the carpenter?
This guy would have been dead. He was married in 1860. So.
Great. I think this is a good place to stop for today. I feel that we're just scratching the surface on Ridgefield's names, and I have so many that I had on my list that I'm curious about, but thank you all for sharing your stories and participating in this very interesting conversation, and especially to Jack, thank you for sharing your knowledge of all these places. I'd I'd like to remind you that our next History Club program will be next month on Tuesday, March 19th at 10 o'clock, always the third Tuesday here in the Scott House. And for that program, we're going to be talking about Ridgefield's women. So it's Women's History Month, and I would like you to, think about some of the important women in your lives and bring those stories. Were there family members, neighbors, co-workers, teachers, or someone who just took an interest in you, who was a lady who lived in Ridgefield? I think it's important to recognize these important people in our lives, and that meeting will be a good opportunity for us to talk about them and share their names and their stories. So please mark your calendar for Tuesday, March 19th at 10 o'clock here for Ridgefield Women, Then and Now. And before we leave today,
No, mine's a bus story.
I would just like us to take a group picture, but I'm going to just close this first and thank you all